Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor. Am I hitting record or you?
I got it. Hello, and welcome back to the Low Carb MD podcast. Tro, gosh darn it, this is why we do a podcast, to have a guest like this. What do you think, man?
I gotta tell you, I'm getting like pins and, not pins and needles, little goosebumps here, because we're standing on the shoulders of giants, you and me, Brian. We've said this often. Tim Noakes, Gary Fedke, Jason Fung, Sarah Hallberg, and we have another giant here today. Somebody who's helped me, personally in my life, professionally. I've read his textbooks. Professionally, he's helped me fine-tune my research. Somebody who's affected me personally on many levels that he may not even know. We have Dr. Eric Westman here today. I'm very, very happy to have on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my great pleasure to be with you guys.
Yeah, it's so great. I mean, everything you've accomplished, and I look at it, and I always see you as a meek, quiet guy, and you get the job done, and you've stood up like a bulldog. And I've seen in conferences like stand your ground with people that maybe questioning low carb with data. And you've always been respectful. You've always done a great job of moving this movement forward. So we'd love to hear, like, people who don't know, if they've been under a rock somewhere, like how you started looking at this as a scientist, as a doctor, and starting to realizing the benefits of dietary change and lifestyle.
Yes, well, and Tro, thank you for your kind words. I feel like I'm just passing a baton along in a relay race, or multiple batons. I learned from the people who I thought were truly giants, the clinical doctors who used low carb and keto approaches. That's Dr. Atkins. So I met Dr. Atkins. That's how I got started. I had two patients. Imagine I'm a VA doctor, so at the Veterans Affairs Clinic in ambulatory care. I'm taking care of people with diabetes, prescribing medicines for hypertension, and two of my patients did a low carb diet. Looking back, it was the reformulation or republication of a book that they did in the early 90s, I think, the New Diet Revolution. But these two patients clearly had results. I mean, they lost 50 pounds each. And I thought to myself, if it was this easy, gosh, I mean, we could solve the obesity epidemic overnight, But then I started talking to my colleagues. They said, well, it's not safe. You're studying the Atkins diet. What are you like? You're going to kill people. And so, I did what I thought any doctor or researcher would do, is that I looked at the books and found clinics that were open. And Dr. Atkins was really the only one with a clinic that was still using low carb diets. I mean, remember, I'm going back to the year 1998. So this is 22 years ago. So I wrote Dr. Atkins a letter, and you can imagine, if you've heard me at medical meetings, I mean, I have to stand my ground, and yeah, some people think that's a little arrogant but I am defending data, and so the conversation went like this. If you can imagine a doctor calling you, well, I guess I kind of did that. I said, you need to do research. And he said, why would I want to do research? I've been doing this for 30 years in my clinic. This is Dr. Atkins saying this. And I said, well, because there are no studies. And he says, well, but it's all in my book. And I said, well, but that's just a few patients. So if you can imagine a young upstart researcher saying, well, you don't have any data. And he's like, well, I've been doing this for the last 30 years and I see the results. I mean, you can understand the tension here. No researcher ever asked to do studies with Dr. Atkins. And so he invited me up to the clinic. And so I still do that today. I invite people to my clinic for people to see what happens. There's so many things that just can't be true. I'm sure you've had this experience as well, that people really just don't believe it unless they see it or experience it. And so I'm at the doctor level where I this is my job. I teach other doctors. At the Obesity Medicine Association, we've taught lots and lots of doctors how to do this. And fortunately, there's a growing number. And but I got started by just seeing some people do it and having concerns about the safety of it, like everyone else. But for me, my worry about cholesterol now is 20 years old. I'm not worried about it, you know. I mean, I would have had people having bad outcomes if my clinical patients were doing worse. So, you know, I don't have any great personal experience using a low-carb keto diet for my own personal needs, although I've been following one for 20 years because it looks so good metabolically. I follow data, and I have to applaud Duke and other medical and academic centers that do allow people to collect data. And if the data look good, you can still keep studying it. Dr. Will Yancey, a colleague of mine at Duke, has continued research into the VA setting on the low-carb diets. So anyway, so I guess my career is one of an academic researcher, but a clinical researcher, and I've always had a clinic, and I'm a teacher now, and it's great. Yeah, I have textbooks and all that, but I mean, we're actually working. I'm teaming up with Amy Berger to write a book that's coming out later this year called "End Your Carb Confusion." So it's going to be
I can't wait. I can't.
end user.
Oh, that's
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Great
Well,
stuff.
What's exciting about it is that it endorses keto diets. I mean, what mainstream book that says you can eat carbs also says you cannot eat carbs? So I think it's going to be, I hope it hits home. And then it's also a very simple kind of approach that Amy likes as well. And so many, I wonder, in your experience, do people overcomplicate things?
Yeah,
All the time.
that's the big thing. Yeah, that's a big thing we see. Everything is so complicated. We say, okay, here's what you got to do, and they make it simple, like what you do. You know, you have one page to say, okay, here's what you need to do. And I think there's a lot of maybe vested interest, maybe just people don't understand the science enough. And so for us, in the standard medical model, the problem has been you don't have time. You have 4 minutes or 8 minutes or 12 minutes with a patient. How are you going to explain this stuff? And that was my frustration. That's why I changed what I'm doing and focusing now on metabolic health, like what you're doing. And, you know, and I think you raised a very, very important point of, you know, what we see clinically, you know, people say, well, you need a randomized controlled trial, but we're all seeing people's lives change and you know, reversing disease and coming off meds and feeling better. And people say, well, that's just anecdote, doesn't mean anything, but you have years and years and years of all these anecdotes that are powerful.
Well, you know, I'm trained in evidence-based medicine. In fact, I went to McMaster, the World Center of Evidence-Based Medicine in Hamilton, Ontario, when I was a fellow. So it wasn't even called evidence-based medicine then. It was called critically appraising the literature. And so I've always been in the general internal medicine field, which is the academic teaching evidence-based medicine part of internal medicine. And then I went out to get a special credential in obesity medicine, because even then I wasn't taught the tools that we need. And but now, you know, the whole time thing is that it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time for a doctor to do this. You know, if you team up with a dietitian or someone who's nutritionally trained, or you tell someone to watch a YouTube video or follow a sheet of paper. I mean, so that's why I've gravitated toward things that are relatively simple, because I do want it to be doable by lots of different people, doctors, patients, not, you know, even people who can't afford pills and products and things like that. But I'd like to know how you guys got started as well.
What's that? It kind of cut out. Oh, people don't want to hear about us.
They don't. Okay.
People don't want to hear about. Are you kidding me?
Okay.
Brian was doing residency with Sir William Osler. That's how he found out about low carb. We always joke that, you know, Brian's really old, but
by the way, Osler was doing low carb, by the way. He was diabetic patients. So, yeah. So they say you're crazy. It's like, okay, talk to Osler about it, or Osler, however you want to say it. But, you know, Tro and I both had struggles with weight our entire life, and we were doing the standard of care, thinking our patients aren't listening to us, and we're getting bigger and heavier. And getting, I was pre-diabetic 2 years ago, 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And so you start realizing I got to make some changes.
Yeah.
And if the standard care is not working, I got to change something. And I've changed variables and I started losing weight. Then my patients asked me about it. And then I had no choice but to tell them, here's what I'm doing. I can't really recommend it yet, even though there's some nutty guy named Westman saving lives all across the US on the other side. And so that's the thing. And then what happened is, really, I think the big thing is, you have credibility. You have Jason Fung with credibility. You have Dr. Unwin, and you look at their clinical experience and how they changed after doing standard medicine forever and being miserable and burned out because you're not helping people. And I think that's a huge topic. Physician burnout. That's one thing I'm looking at a lot. Is I'm seeing colleagues kill themselves and give up medicine, walk away. They start working for their brother-in-law instead of being a doctor, and it's tragic because we already have a shortage of docs. So that's one of those things. I see your excitement and your passion for what you do, and you seeing people getting better. And Tro and I are just following in your footsteps that way.
Well, but thank you for doing what our patients need. And that it's kind of funny because I thought that's what doctors were supposed to do, help people get better. And but yeah, the time issue. Don't you think today the main teaching is from medication treatment, right? Drug companies get involved in teaching, and in the doctor's defense, they just don't get much information about this. So you must have gone out to especially train on your own. Well, you did it for personal use, and then that's great because I don't have that personal use story, but that is a lot of how a lot of doctors get into it. Anyway, yeah, no, I created my own job, basically. After doing research and publishing, we felt we had enough data to open our own clinic, and we've run a clinic at Duke since 2006. Now it's not, as fast and brisk as many of the clinics I've seen because we're still in a university setting. But, we've treated probably 8,000 people at least for a year or so. Not everyone can stick with it and all that. And but I'm still, I kind of felt that clinical need to create a model clinic because the science is just, it's so compartmentalized. Even today, I'm sure you get the cholesterol people. They're doctors, and there's a whole field, and there's a whole drug. I throw up my hands and say, I really don't know what this cholesterol means anymore. It's the insulin, it's the glucose, but in a mainstream medical world, it's tough to talk that cholesterol really doesn't matter, but anyway, that's one of the things that people will fly to me from far away to just have me tell them, no, it's okay if you don't go on a drug to treat this cholesterol problem.
I think, what, I want to talk about this because it's so important. The topic you're bringing up is that the mainstream medical message and the mainstream medical convention and their kind of way of interpreting data may actually harm our patients, right? Yeah. So when you have a doctor who's looking at the hyperlipidemia, the high cholesterol of a diseased population, versus one that is diet-induced or metabolically healed or healing, these are two different entities. Should we treat them the same? I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so, right? And then, but even when you look deeper, just the conventional weight loss advice. Now, your textbook kind of, stood, very much against the convention, and your books have stood far away from that convention. But the convention says eat 7 small meals a day, right? Eat whole grains and fruits because they're healthy, right? So, and when the convention hears us say, hey, maybe those whole grains and fruits, we should set them aside for now, they think that this is insane. When they hear us say, if you're not hungry, don't eat and skip breakfast, they get very concerned. So how much do you think this legacy messaging from the convention has harmed your patients, and how difficult does it make it to do what you do on a day-to-day basis? I'm just curious to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah, I haven't been one to be in the space of criticizing others. You know, I'm still in academia. I do have a sense of diplomacy, and I haven't been vocal like some of my colleagues to say that the guidelines need to be trashed, and it's the companies and I'm trying to stay in my lane, which is my clinical setting. But now that you mention it, yeah, all of these things have truly harmed my patients and the general public. It's just that I have tried to use my credibility. In fact, I saw Dr. Atkins get in trouble because he went outside his lane and then got picked off. He wasn't a PR guy, and he was a doctor in a clinic. And when you get him on the national news, you can make him look silly. So fortunately, now we have trained people in public relations. We have the Nutrition Coalition with Nina Teicholz, and books by Taubes and Teicholz, and vocal doctors like you who can push that message that actually we're being harmed by these messages. And those messages still, every day someone will come in and say, why, what do you mean? I thought breakfast was the most important meal of the day. And I'll say, well, the cereal manufacturers want you to believe that. And so I'll have my clinical message be, edgy, but not so much my public one, because I do want to maintain that credibility that any academic institution has, but especially Duke. Duke is data driven, and while there aren't, actually we have about 5 different programs at Duke, different types of weight loss, including surgical weight loss. And so I like to explain that there are different kinds of cars. I mean, the salesman of a VW wouldn't have credibility if he said, well, the Ford doesn't work. I just test drove a Ford. I mean, so but one of the problems is that one size fits all message got slammed down everyone's throats for so long. So this is just another way to go about it. I'll say, sheepishly.
Do you think it makes it harder for patients to adhere to a low carb or intermittent fasting approach when the messaging is just so far from what we're saying? Forget about saying it's harmful, or forget about saying it's just the system in itself, right? You're a patient who wants to try low carb and intermittent fasting, is coming to see you for a first time. Has their chance of adherence, has their chance, of complying to this way of eating, does it make it harder that the whole world is doing something different? And I often, wonder about the impact of that,
Yeah, the current mainstream eating and mainstream messaging does make it harder for someone to follow a low carb diet that has lots of fat. We were all taught not to eat fat. That has no worry about sodium, as long as you don't have hypertension and a history of heart failure. So you have to, there's no question that makes it harder, but it at the same time, it's never been easier, I don't think, because there are products now that are being developed on a scalable level that people are using, like cauliflower rice, mashed cauliflower. And I saw, advertisement about cauliflower hash browns. And I didn't realize that certain food companies, well, I should have known, but again, this isn't my world. Certain food companies compete with other food companies. And so the ad was, later, Tater, we got cauliflower hash browns, So I think it's going to be exciting to see the shift as people purchase these. And I hope there'll be just more low carb. Gluten-free is, certainly caught on, but it's just not low enough in carbs for most people to have a therapeutic or even lose weight kind of benefit. But yeah, the current messaging makes it harder. And that's one reason why we have people come back, right? That's why we give the repeated messaging of, no, actually you're doing better by not doing all of those things that you were told to do. I used to have this kind of a shtick in my clinic, in my class. We don't have classes at the moment. I send people to a YouTube video of my class for the teaching. But I said this is the pretend pen or wand from the movie Men in Black. And what it does is it erases your memory of all nutrition information. And so actually someone later sent me one of these plastic mock-ups of that actual device that made noise. But yeah, we do need to give repeated dosing to help people forget about what they've been taught, if what they were taught was making them unhealthy.
Well, Dr. Westman, that's one thing you've done. I see you as a pioneer this way too, of doing group classes, group education, where you could really get the message out. As a matter of fact, already just in my 3 weeks of having my metabolic clinic here, my office manager's like, man, you say the same thing all day long. Doesn't it make you crazy? I'm like, I love it. I really do enjoy it. But we are giving that same message. But I think when we could build a sense of community, we're going to do a lot better.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things I used to do in the group class is go around and ask people what a carbohydrate was. You know, can you think of a food with sugar and starch? And, you know, the level of education, you know, we just don't get trained. I mean, just as a general public, or we even get taught the wrong things. And I remember one person who fruit has, you know, and then just kind of, my fruit, you know, it was this kind of mourning or grieving, you know, and you know, food and emotions and all, it gets wrapped up. And although once you get on board and just stay away from the carbs, the cravings go away. And but yeah, the group setting can be a good thing and a bad thing. You know, depends on who's in the group. There might be someone who did it before and said there was a problem, and fortunately we also know how to help people do it now is easy, you know, with some salt supplementation, again, if they don't have high blood pressure or heart failure, and then so we can minimize the keto flu, or I wish it was called keto cold, you know, because it's not like a flu for most people, and even then most people don't get it, right? Yeah, the group idea helps. And now, you know, in the medical, the other thing is I've stayed within the insurance system. I bill, you know, Aetna, Blue Cross, and also Medicare, Medicaid. So I've had to learn how to code things, and, you know, I'm treating hypertension and diabetes, which I am. It's sadly in the system today, if you code just obesity, it might not get paid for. So while the doctor gets paid, the patient gets the bill. So, you know, that's another bias against treating people. That's obesity in general, not just low carb diets. But, you know, that it's been interesting to be able to sustain a practice for this long. And I think I have a waiting list of 6 months now. So, you know, goodness.
You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you, I wanted to see if you see this. I know Brian has seen this. You know, when a patient first comes to me, and particularly I find, and maybe this is my own bias, but the more of a weight issue, the more the severe the obesity, actually I've noticed that the less they know how much to eat of satiating foods. For example, you know, if I see somebody who has less of a weight issue, and I may ask them, and this is completely anecdotal, how many eggs is normal? Maybe they'll say 2, 3, maybe 4. If I ask somebody who's very overweight and I ask them, you know, has a severe obesity, how many eggs is normal? They'll say 2. So I found that, and I don't know if this is true, that most people, particularly those with severe obesity, don't eat enough satiating foods. And they don't think that, they don't realize how much to eat. And again, another example would be, if I said, you know, how many hamburger patties would be normal? And they'd say 1 or 2, you know? So what do you think about this idea of satiating food, appetite, re-educating our patients? And you mentioned it with the Men in Black, you know, kind of erase everything you've known about nutrition. You know, because I tell them eat 2 to 3 times what you think is normal, and they lose weight. But of these foods, of these satiating foods. So how much of this do you think is appetite? How much of this is reprogramming? Like, what is your, I don't know if I'm getting the question clearly, but what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, you know, that's one of the studies, one of the, let's see, 100 studies that need to be done to clarify, to hone the messaging and predicting what person needs what sort of messaging or advice. I don't know. I can't say that I've my training tells me, keep people 20 carbs total per day. So get the carbs really low, so people are in ketosis pretty much. I mean, just about everyone, unless they're on insulin or prednisone. And so the idea is that people will eat less automatically without a whole lot of behavioral, eat this much or that, without apps and without protein and fat grams per day. And so I don't know, but I just say this is what I do because it could be made better. So, and I'm always looking for things that will make what I do better. So what I observe is some people eat 5 times a day, very small amounts, but it usually fades away over time. Some people do undereat what they, like you were saying, what other people might get full with. So, the studies on ghrelin and leptin and the biochemistry of eating are really just kind of in their infancy. I mean, and even then, low carb diets and how they affect these things, it kind of goes in the direction of what we would expect, that people are fuller, they have more of the satiety hormones internally. But I've been kind of underwhelmed, definitely underwhelmed by the current climate at the NIH and the governmental agencies just don't endorse studying these approaches. That's where you get companies like Virta Health funding and doing their own studies. And these are expensive to do. So I guess I'm more, I let people eat as often as they want, as much as but if it's not working, those are the kinds of things I'll get into in more detail. But I guess I find the social eating, habit eating, or eating out of habit or hunger are effective messages. And I kind of, my gut reaction to tell someone to eat more when I'm trying to get them to weigh less and eat less, it kind of can be misinterpreted. And there was a fellow who said, gosh, I could eat all the bacon I want. Well, he ate 3 pounds of bacon every day. And it's like, well, that wasn't the point, to have it's not a competition. Of course, the thrill of that wears off over time. So I'm at first, I'm not very directional on what people should do. Just keep the carbs low and let's just see how your body responds.
Yeah, I found, it's that people say 2 slices of pizza are normal, which in New York is, not that I like or care to talk about calories, but if we were going to calorie equate, is roughly 600 to 800 calories. And then they say 2 eggs is normal. I'm like, how does that happen? How does it happen that we're okay with, 800, that's normal amount to eat. But then when you go to the diner to have some eggs, you were having 4 eggs, toast, orange juice, and hash browns, before you dieted, right? And now you think that those 2 eggs are normal. So I found that this barrier, like this standard kind of social norm of 2 eggs, or the standard social norm of 1 hamburger patty, maybe 2, is, I don't know, it's kind of harmful. I tell my patients, eat as much as you need until you're relatively full. Yeah. And they're like, well, I'm going to have 2 or 3. I'm like, no, I mean like 4 to 6. And if you don't want it all, save it for leftovers. But I find that that's hard for them, and so I wanted to hear, like, do you find it's hard for patients really to imagine? I mean, if you're eating 20 grams of carbs, that's a whole lot of meat, fish, chicken, eggs, Greek yogurt, cheese, and green leafy vegetables, right? It's got to be a lot, right? So do you think it's hard for them to eat? It sounds funny because we're all in weight loss and metabolic health, but eat enough.
Yeah. So again, this is very interesting because I've never really thought about it in this way. Most people will tell me they eat less than before automatically, and as long as they're eating great nutrition. The paper by Gunther Boden, now, I mean, it's 2005. It seems like yesterday when our papers were published, and someone gave me the harsh reality that, Dr. Westman, I can't cite your research. It's too old for my PhD. Like, oh no. So that's why studies have to be redone, every decade. And the Bowden study showed that people will automatically adjust ad lib. I mean, okay, it was about 12 people, but they had diabetes, and they will eat as much as they need, without telling them how much to have. But so I think you may be seeing a segment of the population that, certainly pizza. So when you introduce carbs with the protein and fat, you're going to eat more. I mean, this is just what happens. And so I have people who tell me they used to eat a whole pizza with crust, and now they're satisfied with the pizza bowl or the, scraping the toppings off half the pizza. So there are ways to adjust that. And it would be really great. Hopefully one day we'll be able to measure these satiety hormones, see response of foods. But until that happens, we just have to go by people's self-reported hunger and how they're doing, making sure if they're intending to have weight loss, that it's happening. I mean, I'll tell people now that, if you're not losing weight in 2 weeks, email me, call me, get back. So now I can't see people, but like every 4 to 6 to sometimes every 8 weeks, because my clinic is so jammed, so that I have to tell people not to just wait to come back if it's not working. You ought to be eating less, losing weight, if that's what you're trying to do, pretty much a lot, every step of the way.
How about as far as in your experience, long term? That's always the concern. People go on a liquid diet, they lose 100 pounds, they get back 120 pounds. So many people have been through the ringer so many times. They've lost weight and gained weight, lost weight and gained weight. How do you deal with that? That mental aspect of it? A lot of them have such a fear they're going to lose weight and then gain it all back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that is a common fear or concern. I was taught by doctors in the Obesity Medicine Association who had been in this field for their careers, for their lives, and they generally worked in the same town, treated the same people over and over. If they were using a very low calorie diet, if they were using pills, and occasionally I'll use phentermine or some other pill, but it's fewer than 5% of my patients. It's usually because they were on the other doctor's program that had phentermine. And, but if you don't teach people how to do it in a sustainable way, it won't be sustainable. So that's a huge advantage of, yes, it might be a little slower to do a low carb diet, but there's no hunger, you're not buying pills and products or having surgery. And then, when you lose the weight, you've learned how to maintain it as well. So all of those behaviors that you've been ironing out over time, the habit eating, the social eating, are strategies that
stress eating. Yeah.
Even people who have weight loss surgery need to have those strategies when the weight loss surgery stops working. And the harsh reality there, it's a hard statistic to get at, but probably 50% of people, even with weight loss surgery, regain all their weight because they weren't taught how to do it. So I think that's a huge issue. So what I do is I remind people, I've followed some people for 10 years and they come in now, every 3 months, every 6 months, just to know. And I'll repeat, hey, great job, you've kept it off. I still think tomorrow the shoe's going to drop, it's going to stop working, and it's all going to come back. And I just explain, no, it's not possible. And no, by the way, you can walk into this office any day and I'll see you, So, oh yeah, that's huge. The anxiety and concern about regain, but just reminding folks, and in your experience, I'm sure you've noticed, some people will be aware of a millimeter change in their waistline. And other people are totally clueless. Nothing's happened. I'll measure you're down 5 pounds. No way. Or 5 inches. No way. I'm not. Yeah. Pull your pants out for me. Oh, they are looser. So that's just the variety of folks that we deal with, and some are more in tune and not. But I think that's one of the major advantages of a low carb keto diet, is that you've learned to keep the weight off as you're losing the weight. It's not a different approach. And
have you evolved at all over the years, where things you thought 10 years ago may not work as efficiently as what you're doing now, or have things pretty much, it works and you stick with it?
Well, remember my approach, I went to I didn't say. I went to Dr. Atkins' office in New York City, picking up on how this all got started. I said, what do you do? And, oh, well, we do. And no, what? Well, they had this little sheet of paper, one page, that they had all the food on with little blanks, and they used that in their clinic. And so I'm using something that had been used for 30 years. And so all we did is studied the approach, put in the publications, the research, the making sure that there wasn't any harmful effects as best we could tell. So I'm kind of standing on the giants of my approach. And yes, my thinking has changed and evolved, but mainly to the incorporation of a keto diet as a lifestyle. So I think, Volek, Finney, the other scientists, even the Metabolic Health Summit meeting now, which is pretty much all about nutritional ketosis, is finding that this may actually be a beneficial or a better way to live than one that endorses eating carbohydrates. And I do think that not everyone needs to be keto. I think there are, the research of Christopher Gardner at Stanford and David Ludwig at Harvard. I look to them, and they've done studies where there are people eating higher carbs and doing well. Although I think maybe over 150 grams a day of good carbs is maybe the limit. I mean, so it's still, that's regarded as a low carb diet from the mainstream folks, but nobody endorses junk foods and things like that. So certainly over the last 10 years, you have to get outside the one size fits all thing, which makes me, careful to not say that this is one size fits all keto for everybody, because then I may be falling victim to the same thing that plagued us for so long, that the low-fat diet is the best thing. I think, like different cars, there's going to be different approaches and different practitioners to interact with different styles of people. Where you're from, there may be different language that's used, and all of that, when you're helping someone with behavioral change, is really important to consider.
Well, I think that's an important thing, because I see Tro get pigeonholed all the time. So you only have one trick you use. It's like, anyone who's listened to the podcast knows that's absolutely not true. We always say you have to individualize it. Some people can get away with more carbs. Sean Baker can get away with way more carbs than I can, right? So we start figuring out what works for you. Do you have to have zero carbs? Is it that the carbs, or is it the excess of carbs, or the processed foods? And how does that work on our brain? So we're all in a path of learning, and it's great to have experts like you coming on, and we learn every time. So, I think one thing that we should touch base on, as painful as it is for me, is that you helped Tro out doing a study on triglycerides. And I think that's amazing, from a clinical standpoint, because I'm a frontline practitioner. I'm not a research guy, and I'll be the first to admit that. But you reached out to Tro, and you did some amazing work and gave him some guidance behind the scenes. I happen to know that because I talked to Tro, and he was impressed by you being a big gun in the field, reaching out and helping out. So Tro, what do you have to say, man?
No, first I want to say thank you. It's very difficult for primary care oriented and obesity medicine oriented docs to step into publishing case series and case reports, or even something more. And we first worked together on a case series we did on binge eating, where we shared cases that we had worked on. And then this particular case series, which was just accepted, your guidance is so valuable. And the fact that you'd take an hour and a half out of your day to just, talk to me and talk to my medical student and resident that are working with me, to kind of guide us and give us some feedback. It was really appreciated. And we're tackling, we're trying to address these biases that enter in, from the National Lipid Association or the American Heart Association by publishing this data. So we'll have this, about this article on high triglycerides, severe high triglycerides. And we have more coming with LDL, very high LDL. But I just wanted to thank you and your guidance, and I appreciate that you'd consider me and consider helping me.
Well, you're welcome. And I did a fellowship where I spent 3 years learning how to do that. learning how to write papers and take information into publication. It's a skill. I mean, most doctors don't get trained in that, and they learn that as they get into a research career. But I have to say the medical mainstream also has denigrated or discounted the anecdote or the case series, and your case series, which is multiple anecdotes of treating high triglyceride with a diet that's high in fat, goes against all of the guidelines. You know, you shouldn't have, you know, so the mainstream folks will say you shouldn't do it rather than, oh, this is interesting. You know, so there's a big role for case series, anecdotes. And, you know, 20 years ago when I saw 1,000 anecdotes online about weight loss on the Atkins diet, I was like, well, I don't think people are lying about this, you know? So as an early approach in a new area, doing case studies, that's one of my roles. I see that as an academic role. So, you know, I do have you know, the old saying, publish or perish. You know, I'm a tenured professor now and can shape what I do. And I was asked to be a guest editor of a journal. And, you know, we had talked at a meeting, you had these great cases. So I just reached out, hey, do you have any cases? And I remember you said, well, I don't know how to, well, we'll help you do it. And then you did team up with some students or residents locally. So I think, and hopefully that was helpful. It's a stepping stone, and hopefully we'll get a pipeline of clinical data, clinical experience into the literature. A nice thing about a special issue that I'm a guest editor of is that I can say, yeah, this was a reasonable paper to publish. There isn't someone else saying, you know, you can't publish that low carb stuff, you know, it doesn't work, you know. So there's a bias in the peer review process too, so that you might not get a fair review at a different journal, and that's changing because now more and more people are open to it. But I'm waiting for more cases, more case studies. Hopefully we can set you up with some system to do it automatically. That would be ideal, you know, extracting computerized data or just making flow sheets. You know, I still use the old flow sheet method in my clinic because I can teach better. So when someone comes to my office, I'm standing outside the door with a flow sheet, teaching from the experience of that person. And then that suits well because I have all of the important information already there on it. But no, thank you so much for your time. And, you know, you don't get paid to do it as a doctor. I mean, so why, that was kind of the conundrum with Dr. Atkins. I mean, no one's paying him to do research. He's happy doing clinical work, and no one ever asked him for doing research. I mean, researchers do research, right?
No, on a personal level with Atkins, was he a gruff guy who just got in people's faces? Is that why he wasn't the right messenger maybe? Or was it more that he just got fed up with getting beat down all the time?
Well, you know, I met him after he had been in practice for 30 years. No, he was a very charismatic guy. Patients loved him. You know, he was the quintessential, the doctor you would really look up to in the office setting. But then when you get someone like that in front of, oh gosh, we were at the USDA, one of the big auditoriums in Washington, D.C., the Great Nutrition Debate, it was called. You can actually watch this on YouTube.
It's excellent.
You know, and he was baited. He was, someone else points a finger at him. And, you know, he's not trained to, you know, he didn't have a PR person and market, you know, so, and then of course that's what gets on the nightly news. So he was vilified, you know, made fun of and all that, and which was sad because actually Dr. Atkins was right. And the science says that.
Yeah, that's the hard thing. Jason Fung took heat, and, you know, a lot of these people took heat. You look at Tim Noakes and Gary Fedke. I mean, you know, looking at them, and that's why, you know, when Tro and I were in our infancy here, we said, look, there's a lot of doctors like us who are doing this with great success. We have to give them a platform. right? So every day this weekend, I talked to 3 doctors that are switching low carb and keto, and they're starting to understand it, and they understand the science. They're like, what the heck have I been doing all these years? So that's what's exciting. Your influence of staying the course, because you could have said, I'm just going to quietly do this and not publish, not talk about it. And all, like Atkins, kind of stick in your little clinic and not try to make waves as much as possible, because when you make waves, you get a target on your back. And that's kind of what we're seeing now, is that but the problem is there's a lot more people they're going to have to target. The more people out there doing it, then it's not just one person like you that they could just all go after.
Well, in this special issue, I don't know exactly when it's coming out. Tro, you have the paper on triglycerides. There are other papers on the LDL, on other emerging uses, like in psychiatry and in metabolic issues like glycogen storage disease. And actually, I had the opportunity to write an editorial where I have free reign of what to say. I mean, it doesn't happen much in the medical literature. I mean, you can blog anything you want, but to get it there. So I ended up saying basically that the science is so solid for this, that might not be in the published world, that the burden is on the other people to show that it's bad. The burden isn't on me to show that it's good still, to get that randomized trial. I mean, you don't need a randomized trial to show that meningitis is fixed by penicillin. There never was a randomized trial that showed penicillin fixes meningitis, because everyone died and then someone lived, right? So if everyone else is treating with medications for diabetes, it's not better, you have complications, and in a week, your blood sugars are better and you're off the pills, and you don't need a randomized trial to show that it's fixing this. I mean, you do need to show a randomized trial, have one to say that it's better than something else, or that the long-term, or even an observational study that's carefully done can show the long-term treatment is helpful, or at least doesn't harm people. So I'm glad other doctors are coming on board. I think the language we used was that the science is undeniable. The results are undeniable. You can't say the Ford car doesn't work. I hope it's to the point where, but it's not, I'm afraid. A lot of people still fall victim to that. And you have to be careful, the salesmanship of a diet, and we do that for our own diets and our approaches, but that is to help people get motivated. I saw that in the residential programs here at Duke and in Durham, where if you come to town and you're spending, $3,000 a week, you want to hear that this is the best diet. It's a motivating thing, but there are multiple ways to go about it. And there is a book that should be out this fall, I believe, by Gary Taubes, where he interviewed all of these low-carb practitioners. And I think it was supposed to be published this spring, and now it's coming out this fall, about the same time as our book, End Your Carb Confusion. And I know I was interviewed for that. You guys may have been interviewed by Gary for that book as well. I just don't worry about the mainstream medical folks. You brought up Gary Fetke and Tim Noakes. I'm not concerned that that's going to happen in the U.S., where a doctor is put on trial or put before a professional standards board. Although there are doctors worried about that. There are some health systems that still say you shouldn't use this. And what we do is we just educate, and some doctors are doing it, just not saying. One of the smoothest things is to say you're using the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good, everyone says. And it really is it's closer to a Mediterranean diet than a standard American diet.
Yeah, we say a modified Mediterranean diet just for fun, because it's the same thing. It's all, what are you going to call it? It's the same thing. Whatever you want, what words you want to use are going to make you happy. It's the same thing. You're cutting out.
How's it modified? Well, it's a little lower in the sugar.
Yeah, a little lower in sugar, bread, pasta, right?
I got two kind of questions and maybe a comment. One of my approach, when you asked me to kind of come up with a case series, and I was so honored, and my approach with the initial case series we worked on was to attack the assumptions that people with binge eating shouldn't go on a diet, right? Binge eating, and that's why we put that case series out. And with this case series is, with patients with high triglycerides, that a low carbohydrate diet is not indicated or contraindicated, like the NLA says. So these biases that I feel like are unnecessary or not evidence-based, we're trying to put data out to really to educate, because, I was a 350-pound doctor, and I wish I had your book in my hands then, right? And I wish I had the dismissal of bias then, right? So I feel very strongly about at least, correcting some of the biases that are in the nutritional literature. So can you talk about, I mean, I know you don't want to criticize those biases, but, can you talk about what it's been like to push back against those? Has the convention ever challenged you to a significant extent, or come after you, or because I feel like I get challenged quite frequently?
Yeah, that's interesting. Not lately, and so I am sensing a theme, Tro, that what's the next windmill you want to, go up against and guideline you want to poke a hole in. That I think that's a great way to think about it, to try to find the what's it called, the black swan, or the exception to the rule. That's where the research should be going, rather than doing the same old. At first people were, this is 20 years ago, people didn't believe the research. And I can remember getting up, giving a talk, and someone said, you can't do that. You need 120 grams of carbs a day in the meal. And I was like, I said, haven't you ever not eaten for a day? Or haven't you been in the hospital and saw that some people go for a week without eating? And actually that's not a common experience, where I'll now ask, haven't you ever gone for more than a day without eating? And people kind of look, no. It's like, so we have an experience as doctors in training. We see people who are sick, they're not eating, that the body is amazing in those circumstances. So I thought the next meeting I'll go, and someone to the microphone said, you need 120 grams of carbs a day. And I said, I haven't eaten any. There was a hush in the audience. And so I started doing the diet, actually following it, to help with my initial study patients to figure out how they can, get the string cheese and all these things locally. And then it stuck. And so I finally started talking about my own experience, because people ignore the data. They ignore this. I just presented research that showed these people didn't eat, more than 20 grams of carbs for 6 months. And someone gets up to the microphone and says, but you need to have 120 grams. So I said, well, I haven't. There was
And
a hush.
Breakfast is the most important.
That's an anecdote, though, right? So
yeah, you have to eat breakfast. You have to eat 6 times a day. You got to keep the metabolism going. And you're having success doing the exact opposite. And that's why it's so frustrating sometimes, because like you said, patients will come in, well, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's like, well, I've never heard that before, right? That's new news, right?
I haven't mastered the sarcastic doctor role like you guys. I'm still, but I evaded your question, Troy. I'm sorry.
No, it's, you're hitting it.
No one's ever sued me. No professional standards board has said, hey, you can't do this.
No, I meant other clinicians giving you a hard time,
Oh, that happens still today.
Yeah.
You just deal with it.
Absolutely.
The
the doctor's on the floor beneath me. It's a multi-specialty practice. I mean, they'll tell their mutual patients not to do it,
Yeah, that's why I tell my guys, the endocrinologist and the cardiologist, I said, hey, I'm going to accept your apology in a year or two, and I'm not going to gloat. I'm not going to make you feel bad about yourself, and you'll see I'm right. And then they laugh, and then, we're good friends. We're ribbing each other. But, I think a lot of people have come around because they're seeing success and they're seeing their patients get better, and they're shocked. Because always, and we just interviewed Dr. Lichtash, who did a research study. It was a case report with Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, where they had a patient who lost 0 pounds and reversed their diabetes with no weight loss. And it was, well, it's just the weight loss. So the cardiologists all the time will say, oh, it's because they lost 10 pounds, their blood pressure is better. No, they dropped their insulin by 2/3. That's why their blood pressure is better, not because they lost 6 pounds or 8 pounds, right? So I think a lot of that, we're learning the physiology, and when people see it, they start understanding. So I want to transition very quickly because one of our favorite people, Amy Berger, you're writing a book with, and I want to hear about that. She was one of the earliest. We greatly appreciate her. She was one of the earliest big names who supported us, and when we were just starting out. So we always have a place in our heart for her. But she's doing some great stuff. I mean, I always call her the voice of reason because she comes out and just says it the way it is, and may have offend some people, but then they realize she's right down the road. So what's the project you're working on so people know?
Sure. Well, yeah, Amy has a style of, well, she's a writer by training. So I figured out, I need to team up with a professional writer. And so she has the skills of writing books. The Alzheimer's Antidote came out several years ago.
Amazing.
She has a new one called The Stall Slayer, which is electronic or hard copy, just out this spring, which is great. It's simplifying things. And so we kind of hit it off with that, this keep things simple. Why are people overcomplicating? And at the same time, my product company has become an education company. We did 18 ADAPT events, which were one-day meetings, and people came out for the day in the local area. We connected people who were local experts with local followers. It was an amazing experience. We couldn't do that this year. We hope to get started next year with these ADAPT events. And so what we want to do is broaden the approach and appeal to, yes, it's a low carb, but not necessarily keto kind of approach. So my business partner, Glenn Finkel, is a professional, well, an amateur now, biker. So he'll bike for 100 miles and all this. He doesn't feel well on keto. So there are certain folks who can eat more carbs. Generally, you have to be exercising your butt off as well, but fine, so be it. So Amy decided to help in executing the project, which is keto's fine, a little higher carb, and higher carb is fine. It's still all very low. And I think the title really kind of, we want this to be the end all. End Your Carb Confusion is the name of the book. End Your Carb Confusion. It's with Victory Belt, which I've written with before on keto clarity and cholesterol clarity. And we actually sent off the galley proofs, and it's targeted for publication in December, although you can buy a pre-publication copy now. We're still working on the book cover, so you can buy the book at Amazon, but you don't see what the cover is yet. Anyway, so and I have to say, Victory Belt has been awesome. They've helped, of course, with Jimmy Moore and myself for years, and have a line of keto cookbooks, and so I'm really excited about the project. We're also coming out with an educational platform called Adapt Your Life Academy. And so Glenn Finkel, my business partner for ADAPT, we started making bars, and these next generation bars that we have are really fantastic, but some are a little too high for keto, but you can have them if you don't need keto. So the whole, the book, the product line, and now these courses will be available online so that we can teach. Amy Berger is going to be helping as well. Her tagline is keto without the crazy. So we want to make this easier for people, more approachable. And I think we've learned the medical line where, no, you can't do this without a doctor, but there's so many people who can do this without a doctor. So we're trying to make broaden the appeal, broaden the carb level, and yet still be healthier than just about any other way of eating that people are doing. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, and we love it, because we hear it too from the podcast. We have people that, like one of my new patients came in, lost 53 pounds, reversed his diabetes, his eczema, depression, anxiety better, and all that stuff. He's thanking me. I say, I never met you, so great. So now I have an easy job because I have a healthy patient to take care of, right? And so it's the upfront cost for our time. But it's amazing the resources out there, your resources, and having Diet Doctor and new books coming out, and audiobooks, and what Ben Bickman is one of my favorite guys, and some of his data and his book is great, and audiobook you can listen to on Audible while you're driving. So I don't have any financial interest in any of this stuff, but I do think it's really important for people to get educated. So Dr. Westman, we want to thank you for all you've done and for pushing this ship forward and all you're going to do and your clinical experience. You've always been a solid, I've always looked at you as a solid guy who just does what you do what you do, and you help people and just keep plugging along, and and you're a voice of reason also. So you teaming up with Amy is going to be a great combination, and I'm really looking forward to that book coming out. Tro, we have to have him back on in December to talk about this. No one's going to be dieting in January, I don't think.
I can't wait.
Not at our patients, because they've already figured it out. But yeah, no, my pleasure. It's great to talk to you, and keep up the great work.
I'm just going to say thank you for everything you do. People don't realize that it's difficult to be an entrepreneur, to put out products that are healthier than Snickers, that are healthier than whole grain bars, that are, that make this easy for people. People don't realize that it's hard to, put out these publications and write books, and they think like we're some sort of, greedy industry sponsored people, but you can tell right away you're a man of passion. And like I said, I thanked you early on. I'm going to thank you again for everything that you do. And I really feel like I can't do anything that I'm doing without what you've done and what you continue to do. So thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time, and everyone, thanks for listening. This is great. You've listened to a legend here, and two nutty quack guys who got to interview him. But this is what this thing's about. Really, it's really about us learning from each other, respecting people who've been doing this for a lot longer than we have, and learning. And we've gained so much, and we've been able to help our patients through the work of Dr. Westman, Professor Noakes, and Gary Fettke, all these people. I mean, there's so many great people out there that we're learning from in exercise. JT we had on, he's fantastic, and Ben Bakikio, and these guys have just paid their dues for years and years and years, and now finally people are starting to get it, because they knew what they were doing would work. So that's what we're saying is, please just continue to learn as many resources as you can grab. If you want to learn about cholesterol, you have a million resources out there now. And so, Tro, do you want to close us, man?
No, just thank you both, and keep doing what you're doing. Just happy to be part of this community, and I can't say it enough. You've affected me in ways, your textbook, your lectures, probably you wouldn't realize. And I have to be honest, 6 years ago, low carb, and this is my bias, low carb saved my life. I've been vegan for a year, whole food, plant-based, and it led me nowhere but obesity. So my bias is I'm very happy and thankful to have found low carb, and without, starting back at Atkins and, going all the way up, yourself, Dr. Ludwig, Fettke, Noakes, Jason Fung, I don't know where I would be. I really don't know where I'd be. Maybe I'd be dead. Who knows? And I wouldn't, I'm not saying that to be dramatic, but I was probably on my way to a heart attack. So thank you for everything you do. And thank you for stooping to our level and coming on and talking to us and wasting an hour of your precious time.
Yeah, no. So I'm going to put you to work writing more papers. That's clear.
I'm going to put you to more work editing them then. So
It's
back
a deal.
at you. Deal.
All right. We'll meet up again in December. That's the plan.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Yeah.
Bye.